Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bio 120. Here we are at week 2. We had great discussion board postings. It was very good to get to know you and to learn something about you. I see that we've got a lot of environmental science majors. We've got some health sciences majors, and we have a few other majors in the class. You share some things in common with me, with each other: photography, nature, being outside, watching movies, etc., etc. And so we've got a lot of things in common, which is awesome. This week, we're going to delve more into the chemistry behind biology. Yes, this is a biology class, but you do need to know a little bit of chemistry in order to move forward, because the chemistry is the basis of all life. So, with that being said, let's see what we've got going on. All right. Last week, we learned about the scientific method. And I explained about the scientific method, that it's not quite as easy as what you see in a textbook. There are a lot of steps to it, but it's a methodical way of answering questions. And then you can have a lot of confidence in the answers that you come up with, right? That's the scientific method. And we learned about the characteristics of life, and you compared a couple of those characteristics to something that's non-living and living, like homeostasis, like metabolism, like reproduction, etc. And every life form has to have all of those characteristics. Not all but one, not 3 out of 9. No, every living thing has to have all of those characteristics, depending on your list. So I've seen lists that have 4 characteristics because they combine a bunch of them. I've seen lists that have 8 or 9. It really doesn't matter. They're all the same basic characteristics, just organized in different ways. So we learned about characteristics of life. I would like to point out this picture that I have on this slide. These are 2 of the 10 white rhinos left on planet Earth, and we got to see this brand new baby. It's less than a month old when we saw it, and so I wanted to show that to you because I think in the choices for the final project, this like population ecology has something to do with this. This is an extremely endangered species with only 10 individuals left on the planet. They are chaperoned, shall we say, by armed guards 24/7 so that no poachers can get at them. So anyway, with that being said, what do we have going on this week? First of all, you need to skim through chapters 2 and 3 in your textbook. There are parts of these chapters that you should read, right? You need to read about carbon. You need to read about water. You need to read about the 4 groups of macromolecules. Do you have to know what all the different sugars are? No. Do you need to know what they look like? No. Do you need to know how molecules are synthesized, how they're put together with dehydration synthesis? No. So I'm saying, take a look at these chapters in your textbook. You know, that free textbook, OpenStax Biology 2nd edition. But pick out the parts that you need, is what I'm saying. And the module overview, that document, will also give you some information, which I'm going to mention in just a second. So chapters 2 and 3, here are the parts that you need to concentrate on. Water. Water. Why is water so important? Because water is found in every single organism that has ever lived, is alive now, and will live in the future. Water is a tremendously important component of life, from a single-celled organism all the way up to the billions of cells that are in some organisms, right? Carbon. Carbon is the element of life. It is terribly important because all macromolecules, all organic molecules, and that just means molecules that make up organisms, are made out of carbon, carbon and hydrogen. But the carbon is so important because of this one characteristic that it has. It can form 4 bonds with other atoms and molecules. And that means that the backbone of carbon atoms can be used to make very complex, very large molecules. And that's what you have to have if you're going to have life when you're looking at making proteins or DNA or any of the sugars or any of the lipids, like phospholipids that make up membranes. These are big, big molecules, and they have to have some kind of backbone to them, and that would be carbon. You're going to take a look at the 4 groups of organic molecules, the carbohydrates, the lipids, the proteins, and the nucleic acids. And you need to know, in general, what the purpose of each of these groups of macromolecules or organic molecules is. Macro just means big, okay? Organic just means in organisms. You know, this terminology is not complicated. So what good are carbohydrates? Oh, you've heard of these, right? In your diet. Maybe you're on a low carb diet. So what the heck does that mean? You shouldn't be eating sugars or starches, right? So that must mean that they provide energy. Yeah. What else do they do in cells? Lipids. How are they important? Fats, oils, waxes. Some of the hormones are lipids. Proteins. Proteins, especially the major group of proteins called enzymes, do the work in cells. They carry out all the chemical reactions that are happening in cells. So proteins are tremendously important. And the nucleic acids are important in transferring on heredity into the next generations, right? In the form of DNA and RNA. And then there are some very important energy molecules that are also nucleic acids. So take a look at that. And one way to help summarize this is to what? Look at that Module 2 overview, because that PDF gives you the specific functions of all these organic molecules, and you don't have to tease out that information from Chapter 3 in your textbook. So that's a hint for you. Why did I go backwards? As usual, things are going crazy. Okay. Then what do you have going on? What do you have to do this week? Discussion board postings. You have discussion board postings in this course almost every single week. And remember, your initial post is due by Thursday, and your 2 response posts are due by Sunday evening before midnight, right? So your initial post, there are 2 things that you need to talk about. The importance of macromolecules, what? Carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. And also water, don't forget that part, in cells. Why do you have to have macromolecules in cells? Explain their functions. That would help. And water. Why is water in cells? The most important characteristic of water, and this is my opinion, but still, the most important characteristic of water is the fact that it can absorb so much heat before it changes state. And that's one of the terribly important reasons that water is in cells, because all this biochemistry that's going on creates heat. All these chemical reactions that are taking place creates heat, and you don't want your cell to burn up. Now, water has lots of other really important characteristics. It adheres to itself, it's cohesive, it's is an insulator, which I already said. It dissolves different molecules and atoms in it and ions and all sorts of things. So there are other characteristics that it has that are important. So you've got to answer those 2 questions in your discussion board posting. And then for your response post to other students, you need to take a look at nucleic acids. So if you read a food label, right? All of us have read food labels. What does it state on the food label? It tells you how many calories are in this food, how many carbohydrates, grams of carbohydrates there are, proteins, fats, right? But that 4th group of macromolecules is not listed on the food components on a food label. Wonder why not? This is what you're going to find out. So are nucleic acids necessary in our diets? Good question. it helps to look at the structure of a nucleotide. Deoxyribonucleic acid. So part of a nucleotide is a building block of these nucleic acids. So a nucleotide makes up DNA molecules and RNA molecules. So take a look at the structure of a nucleotide. Go to that chapter 3 and look that up. And this will help you figure out why nucleic acids are not listed on food labels. Maybe because parts of them fall into other categories. Maybe. So take a look at that. Those are your 2 response posts, and that's what you'll be discussing with your classmates in those response posts. Then you have a journal entry. So a journal entry is basically a paper. And you're going to talk about the properties of carbon. That's the first question. Don't skip that first question because I have to see the answer to that. What are the properties of carbon that make it so important for life? That's the first question. And then you're going to discuss the link between fossil fuels and carbon dioxide that's being released into the atmosphere, which is part of the greenhouse gases, which leads to climate change, right? There's a video for you to watch about fossil fuels, and it's a little over 2 minutes long. That is not a long time, and that helps explain every bit of this for that journal entry. So do your journal entry and enter it into Brightspace before Sunday at midnight. You'll also need to watch Reliable Sources. This is a video that we have in the resources section of Learning Module 2. And it's a good one, and it will help you decide whether a source is a good one or not to use, because you will be using sources. Take a look at the Shapiro Library website. We have an excellent library. You can get access to so many full text articles out there through the Shapiro Library because we have so many students that we have a fantastic library. Make sure you use it. I will talk about this more when you start working on your final project, which I've got information coming up about that in just a second. But just take a look at the library and see what it looks like if you haven't used it before. All right. And then you also need to be looking, because in week 3, you're going to decide on this. Be looking at the final project topics. And here's a list of them right here. Oops, I kind of, what the heck? That's me going back and forward with my slides. Anyway, look at this list of final project topics. You will choose one. If you want to do something different, you have to talk to me about it. Okay? All you have to do is email me and I'll tell you, that sounds like a sociology project instead of a biology project. But we can tweak it. We can look at it from this viewpoint or that viewpoint, and maybe you could do something like that. I'm pretty good at helping you figure out something that you're interested in, and helping you focus in a biology way about this final project. So here are some choices. Population ecology. I mentioned this with the white rhinos because they're endangered species, and so we know exactly how many there are in the world. One thing you do with population ecology is you count. You count organisms in some kind of location, right? Another set of animals that we saw in Africa was the wild dogs. They were tremendously interesting. I loved the wild dogs because of their community and how they work together and how everyone feeds the pups and everyone keeps the pups safe. And if a member of the pack is injured, everybody else feeds that individual and helps them. So it was fascinating. But wild dogs in Africa are also endangered. And there are only around 800 in Botswana where I was. And we saw a pack with 13 pups, 23 adults, and 2 of them were collared. They were doing population studies of the wild dog pack that was there at our camp. Air pollution is very important. especially now, and especially since COVID, because when COVID happened, we saw air pollution decrease throughout the world. Like skies cleared up because nobody was driving. And that was amazing. And it shows you how much we pollute the atmosphere with the vehicles that we drive. And I know they're important. I drive too. I know they're important. But still, can we do something about air pollution? Water pollution. Very important. We're poisoning our waterways with chemicals, with sewage, etc., etc. And we have to drink water. And there are plenty of animals and plants and other organisms in water. The energy crisis, alternative forms of energy like solar panels, like wind energy, etc. Eutrophication is an interesting topic. It's about the aging out of bodies of water like ponds and lakes, because they do over time. So that's interesting. The human population and human population growth. We're on track to hit 9 billion people in 2050. And we just hit 8 billion just a few years back, which is crazy. Genetic modification in human beings, in crop plants, etc., etc. There's all kinds of genetic modification that can happen. In humans, this is not allowed yet anywhere in the world, even though it did happen, but it happened in China, and then that scientist was arrested and thrown in jail for several years, and that was the end of his scientific career. So this only happened once that we know of, but right now we cannot do human genetic modification. Deforestation is terribly important. Is happening in the most vulnerable places in the world that are so important for the health of the whole earthly climate, like the Amazon rainforest. So that's very important. Biodiversity and endangered species, that's important. Global warming, climate change, of course, everybody's heard of that. Waste management, what do we do with the waste that we produce, like plastics? Plastic pollution is one that I'm interested in, and also I'm interested in light pollution. And boy, did I see the effects of no light pollution when I was in Africa. We were out in the bush, and there, when we turned off our vehicle, there literally were no other lights shining anywhere. And you could see so many stars in the sky. It was absolutely amazing. I stood out there for way too long looking up at the sky. They had to call me back to the vehicle because I just wanted to stay. So anyway, light pollution is important too. If you don't see a topic on here that you're interested in, like I said, all you have to do is email me. If you have no clue, I can give you some more suggestions. You just tell me something that you're interested in. I bet I can find some way to relate it to biology. If you have an idea, if you're interested in a certain area, but you don't feel like it's connected to biology, let me think about it because I can help you. Just email me because we need to get this figured out before week 3. In week 3, you need to start on this project. So that is coming up. All right, let's see if I can go to the next slide. Yay, I did it. This is a fish eagle. We saw lots of fish eagles in Africa. They are absolutely gorgeous. Looks like a bald eagle, but it is not. They don't have white tails like bald eagles do. So usually at this point in my announcement, I give you at least one tip of the week. And one thing that I do in order to not miss something that I need to be writing about is to just jot down on a little piece of paper, Post-it note or something, a list, just notes of the things that I need to answer in a letter, in an application, in an assignment, whatever it is. You have assignments. So just jot down a list, right, of things that you need to answer so that you don't miss anything. And then you don't have to keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth to the guidelines. Just jot down a short little list just to remind you so that you don't forget anything. And with that being said, I hope that you have a wonderful week number 2. If you need anything, email me, m.sigmon@snhu.edu, and we will talk about it and figure out a solution. All right? I hope that you have a great week number 2.